in the wake of Bungie layoffs, learning that whatever was next for Destiny, whether it was called Destiny 3 or just the next Destiny, it has been shelved. Leaders at the company gone, like Mark Noseworthy and Luke Smith, calling into question what exactly is the future for the franchise. And I've done shows with Mike from 30 and So Gaming about Destiny since I've known him for almost 10 years now. So this was undeniably what we needed to talk about, and we covered the layoffs, but I really wanted to discuss specifically the future of the franchise with him. I'm going to end the previous stream, which was a show about gaming news this week, and it largely centered on Destiny and Q&A. I'm going to end that and redirect people over. Thank you guys so much for the support. So Mike, man, thanks so much for being here. Glad to have you back on the show for a second week in a row after a bit of a break, and perfect timing for us to cover something like this.
Yeah, I'm really glad Bungie decided to do this while I wasn't on vacation. I appreciate it.
That's very kind of them, right? Yeah, they're doing these layoffs at like the end.
Thanks for the layoffs after I got done with my vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously not to be glib. I mean, a lot of people did lose their jobs, which is just, you never want to see that. And you read from the blog post, this came from mismanagement, to, getting so ambitious about what they could do and what they thought they could achieve. And now we're looking at sort of the fallout from that, from years of financial troubles is what we're hearing. Just never really being in a great place financially. And now we're seeing this. What was your initial reaction to, like, walk me through it, right? The layoffs. And then I start hearing what Luke Smith is gone. I'm like, wait, what? That seems huge. But we have heard calls for changes in leadership, most notably people like, get Pete Parsons out of there. So how have you kind of processed everything that's sort of been, it's almost been like a ripple effect of announcements?
So what's funny is back in like 2016, going into 2017, when I went to TwitchCon, I met people, talked to people over there. And, when you go to these events and stuff like that, people drink, you have conversations, people kind of loosely say certain things. And it was mentioned to me back then that Bungie had money problems. And I was just like, yeah, that makes sense, right? And this is right before Destiny 2 came out and whatnot. And now that we know, because hindsight's 2020, we know that Bungie struggled Destiny 2 as well. The GDC, they came out and said, they almost didn't make it. They almost went under. They had to do a big shift and whatnot. So I wasn't very surprised when it finally came out that Bungie can't handle money, because I do a podcast on Thursdays and we talk about it all the time. I was like, Bungie just can't handle money. And now here it is, right? Now the proof's in the pudding. It came out that they just didn't know what they were doing with money. And Sarge last night was like, you know what they could have done? They could have hired an accountant that could have did something to actually help them with the money. So I wasn't surprised when they said this. Now, obviously, the last year, was it November, when they came out with the 100 layoffs that they had originally? And then Pete Parsons said that, we're not going to lay off anybody else. And then obviously here we are with 220. Jeff Grubb said it was going to be 350. And then they moved 155 people to a new Sony studio that they're going to make for them, or just breathe them into like Sony, correct?
Well, yeah, 155 over the next couple of quarters will be integrated into SIE.
Right, integrated into Sony, yeah.
And then Schreier says there's about 75 people being spun up into a new studio.
Okay, so 75 of the 155, or 75 on top of the 155?
A completely separate 75 is being spun off into a new studio, yes.
Yeah, so I wasn't very surprised when they said Bungie had money issues. So that didn't shock me. But the layoffs, we talk about a couple months ago when Tango Games got shut down. You're like, what are you doing? Like, this game was successful and Microsoft shut them down. And then leading up to the final shape, they're like, this is it. We need our support to get this. And everyone's like, yeah, all right, let's give them support for the devs. And no matter what happened, they were going to get fired regardless. So that's a little shady as well.
Well, when you think about all of our time with Destiny, before you were sort of made aware of some of their financial struggles, did you ever conceive that this game was having those types of troubles? Because I remember thinking, this is the one game that everybody tried to beat. Every time a live service game would come out, there's the narrative of, is it a Destiny killer, right? And I started saying, I wouldn't even set your sights on that, right? Like trying to kill Destiny or trying to appeal to Destiny's audience. That's dangerous. That's a dangerous task, right? Did you ever think that it was going to be like this? Did you ever think that it was going to turn into this, oh my, they're in financial trouble, they're not going to make it.
I obviously from the people I talked to, that's when I started hearing the buzz back then. But when it came to me was when we were playing Destiny, and then they said that you have to buy more microtransactions, and the reason you're buying the microtransactions is to make more content. And I was like, that's not how that works. So to me, right then and there, I was like, they're overspending. They don't know what they're doing, and this is why. Because look, I worked in the film industry for 20 years. Okay, if you want to take a dev and then you want to take a crew member, cameraman, art department, whatever it is in the film industry, you can compare it to a dev. We don't get paid after the project is done, right? The upper management gets paid after that. They get the points on the back end, the director, the producer, the executives inside the studio. They get their money after the fact. We get our checks when we're done with the job. The devs get paid weekly, monthly, whatever. The job is there. They have a salary. That's what it is. And when they come out and say, well, you're supporting the devs, that is 1000% BS, because the devs are getting their checks. They're getting their stuff. It's the people up the upper management. And this is why I don't like microtransactions. This is why I don't like what they do in the industry, because the people that are getting paid are not the devs, right? They might get a bonus at the end of the year for doing a great job or whatnot, but that's not guaranteed, right? What's guaranteed is the work that they're doing, and they get paid regardless if the game does good or bad. They got their money. Now, obviously, if the game does well, they're going to get more money in fluctuated into the business, so they can go on to make the next game, to make the next project, so they get a new contract or a new thing to keep working for the company, to keep food on their table and keep it. But to think that you're buying that $30 microtransaction or that $10 microtransaction, it's going to Steve in the accounting department, that's not happening, right? It's not going to the dev making the stuff over there. They're getting their weekly check, and to think that you're paying for the devs to stay in business, that's not what's happening.
Well, I mean, I'm going to push back a teeny bit. My memory of hey, this one ornament made enough money to fund. It was like an exotic quest or something. It was something like that. I always felt like that was said in a way to say, hey, listen, something as simple as an inexpensive microtransaction or an ornament can actually end up paying for, pays for content. It funds the content, because to a certain degree, you do have to justify future content. Like if they're making enough money, if they're getting enough stuff to sell, then that either motivates the publisher to continue funding whatever they do in the future, or in Bungie's case, when they were independent for a short period of time, that's quite literally keeping them solvent so that they have enough regular income to justify investment into future content. So I do think sometimes it's not necessarily like, well, if you spend this money, it's going to go to Hank in the art department, but it does.
They make it sound like that though.
To
the consumers.
I didn't feel like Bungie ever did that. Like with the ornament thing that was said in the blog, it was sort of like something as simple as an ornament. Yeah, it paid for like 0 hour or whatever. Like it justifies that investment of like, hey, we have these other side projects or side pieces of content we want to do, and we made so much money off this one ornament. We can kind of allot that money. I maybe I'm wrong. I never got the impression they were trying to tell me, hey, when you do microtransactions, it's going to the dev teams. It was more like, this helps the game. This helps keep the game going. It helps it running. And I think there's an element of truth to that. Like if a game is financially successful, it keeps going. It's why I'm famous for... I'm not famous. I famously say, I actually want these companies to make buckets of cash, because then they're going to keep making the games that I love.
Yes and no. I mean, there's games that make boats of cash, and they're just like, yeah, it's not... They might reevaluate and go, well, it was a lot of money to put in. I don't know if we want to do that again to get what we get out, so they close the studio down after. You know what I mean? Like happens same thing with television shows and whatnot, where they make good money, but they're just like, we'll stop it at year 2, because they know the longer they do it, the actors get paid more, the director gets paid more, right. So they're not getting as much money in return, and that's why they usually cut it like year 2. Speaking television wise, and movies for sequels. Now, as far as video games go, I can't speak on that, experience wise myself. I have friends in the industry and whatnot that tell me, but they like to the executives, the the companies themselves like to tell you, oh, yeah, thanks for our support, we can keep it going. But at the same time, I think a lot of people that are just buy the microtransactions are, yeah, I'm supporting the devs, I'm supporting the devs. Supporting the devs works for independent games, right? 3, 5, 10, 20 people working for a studio, making a game, buying the stuff, buying the game, buying the DLCs. That helps those devs because they're not part of this big conglomerate, executive corporation type of thing. When you're talking about companies like Bungie, Activision, all these other things, you're not helping the devs. You're helping the executives coat their pockets.
Yeah, for sure. Well, in light of that, okay, we're now looking at a company. We're now looking at Bungie, really stripping down. So I don't think there's really any reason to speculate about like the 75 people with that spinoff or people getting integrated into SIE. The question is, what is the remaining 850 people going to work on? Like, we know a portion will be working on Marathon. But the question we're asking today is, what's the future for Destiny? Because now, we got these rumors that the future of the Destiny content is going to be these rally events, and you're repeating contents to get ready for the rally events, and they're gonna sort of move away from traditional DLCs and story. So for the longest time, this was the going theory, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I thought a lot of us were looking at Destiny 2 saying Destiny 2 is going to end of life. They're going to slowly they're going to put it into coast mode with these episodes. And then they're going to start working on Destiny 3. Well,
right.
Whatever you want to call it, because Jason Schreier is like, it wasn't Destiny 3, it wasn't in development, whatever it was canceled, it was early development, okay? Regardless of that, they had plans to do something else and something new with Destiny, and that has been canceled. And that's why Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy are no longer at the company. Whether they were pushed out or whether it was like, well, you just completely changed the trajectory of the business and now we don't have a role, that's not really worth debating either. But what is worth debating is, if that's what all of us thought, you're going to sort of coast D2 and build something new, Destiny 3, a new Destiny. If you're not doing that, what are they going to do? What's the point here? What's the future for the franchise? What's the future for Destiny 2?
I think they do what Division 2 did and what Massive did. They kind of went on coast mode and they they supported it, but like bare minimum, like minimal viable product type of thing, where you're doing the hunts and every season you would just do the same thing. And they said they stopped supporting it. And then halfway through they went, you know what, we're supporting it again. They went back in on Division 2 and started supporting it again for doing different things. I think that's sort of what they'll do with Destiny, because I said it in your chat the other day when I popped in for a couple minutes. I said there's no way that Sony paid the money that they paid for Destiny or for Bungie and not to use the Destiny IP, right? IPs, like, corporations need IPs like that. They need the Harry Potters, the Transformers, the G.I. Joes, the Star Wars, the Marvel. Those IPs, certain IPs are really hard to come by, and when you find one, you got to keep it because that's what makes the money, right? This is what other avenues are doing now with like Mario, making it into a theme park and whatnot, right? Remember years ago they were talking about the Destiny universe, how they were going to make comic books and TV shows and all of this stuff. What happened to that, right? Like that completely went to the wayside. So I have questions. Did they take that money and kind of move it over to sections that they said they were going to do and then didn't use that for that purpose? Who knows? I would love an investigation. I'd love to be a fly on the wall. I would love if Jason Schreier did some sort of story on this down the road. But I think they just kind of coast for a bit. I think they put all hands on deck for the remaining people. They work on Marathon. They try to see. This is not a smack against Marathon. This is just what I call minimal viable product, right? You're not spending $300 million to make like a Spider-Man. You're spending like $50 million to make this live service game, and you're putting microtransactions and different things in here to see what your return of investment on is with this. So I think they do all hands on deck. They do Marathon. It launches. They see how it is what's the word I'm looking for?
Performing?
Yeah, like the metrics of it when it comes in performance wise, and they go, okay, so this is how much money we put in. This is how much money we can make out. All right, let's put more towards this instead of putting $400 million towards a Destiny 3, right? Or on top of that, instead of putting that much money towards Destiny 3, maybe Destiny 3 comes back a little bit and is sort of like Destiny 1. You know what I mean? Maybe it's much more linear. Maybe it's much more sort of like what they had originally, where it was too linear and they got rid of it. Maybe they go back to that. But the Destiny IP is super money making. It's an established franchise. People love I can't imagine them not doing anything with the Destiny franchise. So I think they do Marathon. They experiment with this other game, whatever what the project was called, or what they're calling it, and they see how that live service aspect works for Sony, because that's what they're going for. But they also, in the back of their mind, are like, well, we have this Destiny IP. Like, what are we going to do with it? We paid $3.2 billion for this company, for the tech, for the people there, but also for that IP.
I do not disagree with you at all. I think that the Destiny property and franchise is way too valuable, and I think part of this was you guys can't just keep going again. Like, the more I've thought about this, I was kind of talking about this at the end of my last stream, and I was like, did they want Mark Noseworthy? Did they want Luke Smith gone? And I think to a certain degree, Sony wants a leadership reset here. Because if they had all these financial troubles, if they had all these issues, and they got too ambitious, and and Pete Parsons may not, he may not last the week, right? Because it seems like he did not do a good job as a CEO. It's time for him to go. Well, if that's the case, I could see Sony saying, we're not going forward with anything under your leadership. You guys we've got to press the pause button and completely reassess, foundational things like leadership and your structure of team leads and who's in charge, who's casting the vision for this game. Because if the last 10 years have been this raucous and have been this shaky, but Sony could be saying, we're not signing up for that. You got to be kidding me. Because I agree with you. I think the Destiny IP is way too valuable to not at some level launch some sort of a reset button. Because people are like, well, what do you do with Destiny 2? And I was like, I think you nuke the site from orbit. I think you've got to give it a fresh start, which I know would upset the base, but you're losing the base anyway, right? Like, it might be more intriguing to rally your base of players to essentially be like, everything's starting over, or bide their time, which seems like what they're setting the content funnel up for, which is to bide their time and slowly rebuild your teams and your internal vision and then build the next game. Like, I don't think they're going to forever have whatever was next planned for Destiny on the shelf. I just don't think they wanted the current leadership to be at the helm.
Do you think they just throw it out there as, they remade or remastered Last of Us 2. Do you think now that Sony owns Destiny, they do a remastered Destiny 1 to kind of fill in the gap between?
Oh my gosh, I never even considered that. I have to say, if they nailed it, it'd be a great way to experiment with the new engine. I definitely think they'd have to consider giving, I was saying this in the stream this morning, you have to give Bungie a more agile engine. I think they're incredibly talented. I think the things that they've done prove that, but I think they're in an engine that is cumbersome. It's tough to do quick updates. It's tough to create and add content and make changes in. And I think if they were given something that had far more agility and was far more, even something that felt a little bit newer, I think obviously the concern is making it needs to feel like Destiny, and I think that would be tough if they weren't in the Tiger engine. But their talents properly harnessed would be incredible, and a Destiny 1 remake would be a great way to say, hey, can we build the foundations of this game in a new engine, in a new area, in a new way? I would love that. I totally would. Now, the question would be, would people sneer and be angry about that and say, that's a cash grab, you're just trying to draw in nostalgia, or whatever the case may be.
Of course.
But that might give me what I want. I'm saying, listen, you got to press the reset button here. You can't keep adding on to D2. I think that ship has sailed. I think you got to use D2 for ongoing content rhythms right now, just to generate revenue and maintain your presence in the public and maintain a player base. But I'm not against that. I know a lot of people would be, but man, I'd be down for that nostalgic trip through D1, because there's some great content back there.
You can still play it. It's still a playable version of the game. You know what I mean? Like, you could play it right now. Well, which you can't say that you can do for Destiny 2. You can't play the Red War.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can't go back and play vanilla D2 stuff. That's all gone. That's true. if they were to do that, I think that would buy them time for,
that's what I'm saying. Like buy
game.
themselves time for whatever's next down, because I can't imagine they're just sitting on the Destiny IP doing nothing for the next 3 to 4 years, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. They have to do something. If it's extending it like Destiny or Division 2, like they did for a couple years until they have their act together. If it's taking old stuff and now that they own the IP, they can do what they want with the old stuff. I don't know. I just feel like that IP is just so massive. Maybe Sony decides to make a movie. I don't know. I mean, they can. They have a production company. They have their own studio. So
it does make you question, because I remember when Bungie wanted to get into publishing, they wanted to put that new studio. I forget where it was. It was in another country. They were going to expand their own studio space. You really got to wonder, whenever they promoted Luke Smith to that position, it seemed they had plans for TV shows, movies, and other media with Destiny. And that really dovetails with a lot of the stuff that we know Sony's all about right now. They really like the idea. They had a Gran Turismo movie. You've got The Last of Us TV show. We've got God of War and Horizon content coming soon. Well, not coming soon, but it's in process. So yeah, I think that dovetails very well with the way Sony views property. So I'm curious if anything ever comes of that, because if you're looking, you and I are in agreement that the Destiny property is incredibly valuable and worth holding on to. So when do you think we see signs of life in sort of a timeline here? Because it seems like Destiny 2 will very much be the sort of placeholder for non-substantive content for a while. Like, it's just going to kind of be put on, as we all kind of predicted. I don't think it was difficult to predict that there would be some semblance of cruise control, of like just sort of putting the game on cruise. At what point do you think we see signs of life in the franchise outside of Destiny 2?
I mean, it all depends on, like what I said before, what happens with Marathon. If Marathon bombs or their next thing doesn't do very well, I think that gets burned faster. If Marathon does well, I think that takes longer. So I also think that, obviously they're talking about the PlayStation 5 Pro, but 2027, 2028, PlayStation 6, 2029, right. You know what I mean? Like, I think when that game system is announced or comes out, or whatever the next hardware thing is, if it is a PlayStation 6, if it is a handheld, if it wherever we are in the industry 4 or 5 years from now, I think that's when they use that to push the next console. Again, it's a massive IP. I don't see them doing nothing with it. But at the same time, if Marathon doesn't do very well, or it does well, and they know what they're doing with that game, and they're like, okay, this is stable. We know what we're doing. We're making money from it. All right, let's now put in Destiny 3. Let's start doing development with it, and then start murmurs about it and hiring for it and doing whatever else they need to do for it.
A lot of feedback today in my chat centered around the fact that people feel that the game right now is really, really hard to return to, or it's really, really hard to start brand new. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? How would they right now, we've thrown out some ideas to bide their time with like a D1 remake or something. How do you bide your time with a game that is really, really tough to return to and tough to start brand new? Because you have to have a funnel that's open to newer returning players. And the general consensus I kept getting from chat was it's just not there right now. It's really tough to come back to the game or to jump in brand new.
Yeah, I wouldn't know from experience about starting brand new. Like, I haven't played the game in 4 years, right? Something like that. So I don't know what that entry point is. I know when I play like No Man's Sky, that's overwhelming, right? And you could just start from fresh, but it's very overwhelming. If you go to start a character in Warframe right now, it's very overwhelming because there's just so much content in Warframe. You just don't know what to do or where to start or stuff like that. So I would assume it's sort of like that. And if they're not very good with the new players, incoming players, the only way I can think of is to remake, restart, where it's a start fresh, where kind of like everyone starts off at the exact same point again, and then you play it through. And that's not going to bring millions and millions of people back. But again, there's a whole generation. It's been out for 10 years. My son is 10. He was born 1 week before Destiny came out, right? So he's turning 10. They're going to have their 10. So he's never played the game. So it's a completely new, tissue in the box. Pull a tissue out. There's a fresh tissue there. There's brand new people that have never played Destiny before. So they could repackage it, put it all together, put it on PlayStation Plus. You know what I mean? Like they could do all these things where they can get people in on the ground floor once again. I mean, Bethesda does it with Skyrim. What's the? I know it's a single player game, but the fact still stands that they keep bringing people back, and I think that Sony is looking at this franchise going, what do we do with it? What do we do with it for the next 5 years? We got to do something. We have to bring people back. We have to maintain stuff. Maybe they do a soft reboot. I don't know, but I definitely see them doing something with Destiny 1 remaster, starting it back over, something to get the people that have never played the game before into the game, leading up to whatever Destiny 3 is down the line in the future.
I can't believe we're watching footage here from MK Ice and Fire, and he just had a piece of loot drop, and it was arms. I recognized the little picture. It was, the little thumbnail for the loot. It was the same arms from like vanilla Destiny 2 when it first came out. I can't believe they're still using some of that loot. That's hilarious that loot.
I don't even know what are we watching here. What was this from?
It's from the Final Shape. Yeah, this is the Final Shape gameplay. So there's a lot of new mechanics and things that might not look familiar to you.
Yeah, I'm looking at this going, I don't remember this at all.
Yeah, this is not from our era, Mike. This is from the new. Everything's super colorful and purple and pink and green. Like it's they really upped.
Yeah, here they did wonderful things with the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the movement continues to just look like something that makes Destiny stand apart, along with the gunplay. Because people have said, well, what if they make Bungie work on something else, like a third-person action-adventure game? And I was like, I don't think you'd ever take them off of a first-person shooter project, but I think they could nail a third-person game, because when you're in third-person in Destiny, and you're doing a super, or you're doing some of this tether and jumping and stuff, it just feels really, really good. I think they do a lot of things right. They really do. And I think that whatever they end up touching, I think it could be excellent. But what you were talking about with, trying to bring people back, I just continue to think you have to have this. There has to be a player onboarding thoughtfulness, because whenever I booted up Deep Rock Galactic with my wife, we were inundated with splash screens and this thing and that and the other and all these updates, and I had no idea what any of it meant, because I have no context. Right? When you come into a game after it's been updated and fixed, and you've been in there since day one, you understand how great everything is, right? It's kind of like when you clean your room and it was really messy before, and it looks more impressive to you than somebody who didn't see how messy it was.
Yep.
And I feel like in this game, it's like, I would, if right now, somebody waved a magic wand and was kind, and I could come back and play, I would have no idea. Like, I wouldn't know what
would you want to play. Would you feel overwhelmed by what it is?
Right. Setting personal things aside, what I want to play. Yeah, I would feel a little disoriented, maybe even a little overwhelmed. That's how I felt in Deep Rock Galactic. I was almost kind of put off. I was like, I don't know what any of this means. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. The player onboarding, I've also heard in Warframe, is that they don't tell you anything. You're like, I don't understand. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? So I think any live service game needs to take a lesson from that. There has to be some semblance of, hey, you're brand new, right? And I wonder if there would be some benefit into being like, making them play a mission with all the old stuff and be like, this is what it used to be like. We're going to kind of take you through a story, an experiential story so far, right?
A Cliff Note version?
Like, let me play a mission or half of a mission with double primary. Just do it. Make me suffer through that garbage of vanilla Destiny 2,
Well, they wouldn't think it's garbage because they would be new players, right? So they wouldn't know any better.
But what they would feel, though, I mean, look at what we're looking at now. I mean, he looks like a freaking superhero out of a comic book, swinging green arms and slashing it. And you'd go from the very early stages where it was slow and more plotting and double primary, and the power fantasy was very subdued, and he's tethering and launching with like some kind of a grapple hook. I think that might be, it just came to me now, an experiential story so far with respect to gameplay, not the actual story itself, not the campaign. I need to know where has this game come from? Imagine if No Man's Sky did that. Like, no one has any concept of how much that game has evolved unless they've been there since the beginning.
Right.
And I think that's hard because you're doing a handful of things there. You're communicating value, you're communicating investment, and you might honestly, inadvertently, acclimate the person to the temperature of the water. They would know what they need to do and where they need to go and what the content's all about. Because right now, it's like, if I came back to this game, dude, I would be clueless. I wouldn't have a clue what any of the systems are. And I'm a streamer. I'd have the advantage of chat being able to tell me everything.
Right.
But if I wasn't a streamer, I'd be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. Like
well, it's like that with any game with like ESO. When you play ESO, if you played it and then stopped for a while and went back, you'd be like, what am I doing? Where was I going? What is this? They added this? What is this? There's a new area? Like, you would be so overwhelmed and inundated with stuff to do. I did see a video like 6-7 months ago before the final shape and stuff was supposed to come out in February, and someone they turned on Destiny for the first time, and it was just a title screen after a title screen after a title screen of like what content was in there, and they had to keep hitting A to get past all that stuff to just get to the game.
Yeah.
Right. And it reminds me of Suicide Squad does the same thing. Every time a new season comes out, it's like slam. It's like, what is all this stuff? You're just you're throwing it up at me, and I'm like, bro, I don't even want to play this right now because I have no idea what the hell any of this means.
Yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose. You know, I could make the best cocktail in the world, but if I mass produced it and I made you drink it out of a hose, you wouldn't be able to tell that it tasted any good. You'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm guzzling this thing that you took all this care and time to build. And I feel like that's the mistake so many of these games make, is they forget the poor guy that has to come into the game and see 18 update splash pages in a row just to get to the game. And now all that hard work that you've poured into your game, all that love and passion and that thoughtfulness about players and what the feedback was, nobody that comes in new is oriented. Even if you've taken a break from the game, right? I've taken an unintentional 3-year, I took an unplanned 3-year break from this game, and even I would come back after 3 years. Like, I remember what the foundations were, and even I would be completely disoriented. So you got to think about returning players as well. Right now, do you have even a modicum amount of desire to go back and check out the game at all?
No, I look at this, and it looks cool, but it does absolutely nothing for me. I've always used this. I said this is like my stripper ex-girlfriend, Destiny, right? Because Destiny is the name, right? Once you break up with somebody, right, you just don't pick up that phone and call them or text them or anything. And I look at this, and it does nothing for me. I used to love. I have 3,000 hours over Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. I know that's kids play for most of the people, but 3,000 hours in any game is insane, okay? And I look at this, and I'm like, yeah, I have no interest whatsoever. I enjoyed my time with it. But I have no interest. And even if Destiny 3 comes out, I wouldn't be interested in Destiny 3 because I know the way they did Destiny 2, and I wouldn't want Destiny 3 to be like Destiny 2 as far as the monetization and the stuff that they did and all the stuff, because that's what turned me off of the game. So I would wait to see what Destiny 3 is before I jumped into it.
Now, we were hearing reports that, Lightfall did so terribly and interest dropped so low that was kind of the beginning of all of the crisis for Bungie. We're also now hearing reports that the final shape didn't do any better than that.
Oh, see, I thought it was successful. They said it was very successful.
We're hearing conflicting reports because the critical response, commercial response, seemed to be very strong. It really did. Like, the player base numbers were so good, I thought, oh my gosh, they must have sold a ton of copies. Now, we had a theory this morning that people were buying the cheapest version. They were not buying all those extra micros because everyone's confidence in the game was so shaken. They just paid like the cheapest way in because they just kind of wanted to see what the culmination of the story was.
Right.
And then the bottom fell out. Like, it was like everybody basically walked away probably. So that long tail of revenue generation you typically get from a DLC may have just not been there. Given that reality, going forward, how do you think they monetize this game? How do they maintain and support the production costs of a studio with 850 people? That's a big studio.
I mean, the only way I could think of, I'll go back to it, minimal viable product, where if a game takes 3 to 5 years to make, but they only make it for 2 to 3 years, and then they put it out there, and they're fixing it over the next 2 to 3 years. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a complete game. They're listening. They'll fix it. We hear your problems. We understand. We're going to change the balance. You know what I mean? Like, this is the stuff they do with games of life. And it's not just, I'm not picking on Bungie. It's just, that's what live service games are. Live service games are, the game's supposed to take 3 to 5 years to make. They put it out year 2, and they fix it over the next 3 to 5 years. And it does two things. It gets people hyped for the game. People are excited about the game. People, because we're just ravenous. When you put a piece of meat in a room with people, they're just like, I tear it apart with hungry tigers. But then they're just like, okay, what's next, right? And with a live service game, they could be like, hey, we hear you. There's balance issues. We'll fix the balance issues. And like, see, these guys are listening. They're doing something different, right? And this is exactly how live service works. So they'll push it. It'll be broke. They'll fix it. Something else will be broke. They'll fix it. And the way they monetize it, as while you're waiting because you're having fun, happen. I just got disconnected from you for a second.
Okay, keep going.
The microtransactions come in, and you're like, man, I'm having so much fun with this game. No, I'll give them $10. I'll give them, again, we don't know. Is this going to be a full price $70 game with microtransactions on top of that? Is it going to be a $40 game with microtransactions on top of it? Is it going to be a free-to-play game with more expensive microtransactions on top of that? These are all things that we would have to wait and see, but that's how they would monetize it, right? They would, instead of working on a game for 3 to 5 years, they work on it for 2, put it out, keep working on it, but monetize it as they go.
Well, that actually really touches on a debate that we had earlier today, because I argued and I said, listen, Destiny 1 vanilla was just so barren and thin that if you launched a game like that today, it wouldn't survive. And I referenced Anthem, right? So given that reality, you seem to be in agreement. Do you think they could get away with that? Wouldn't they then face the problem that everybody's facing this problem is there's so many games and there's so many live service games that if you come out and you're thin, half-baked, and not ready to go, you are gonna die. I mean, it happened with Kill the Justice League. It happened with Anthem. AAA studios, big budgets, tons of stuff, and don't have a good, viable, ongoing plan, and no one sits around and waits for you to fix the game. They just suffered death.
Here's a perfect example. When Destiny came out, live service was there, but it wasn't as big as it is today. Right? So when it came out, there was Defiance. Defiance was a live service game, right? That was linked to a TV show, and that was before Destiny came out. There was Warframe. Warframe was there. They had Neverwinter. Neverwinter was a live service type of game. Borderlands, sort of, but it sold DLC or whatnot, but they kept supporting that game. That's a completely different landscape now, because back then, look how Destiny killed Defiance. One live service game killed the other live service game, and then won over Warframe as well, right? And that was just one live service game in a world of just 4 to 5 live service games at the time. Now, everything's live service. Even games that didn't start off as live service are live service now, right? So there's completely too many games for live service, and the problem with that is when you're done with the game in the past, you would be done with the game, put it down, and go play another game. But now when you're done with the live service game until the next content comes out, you put that down and go play another game, but then that gets updated. Now you go back to that game. So you're not giving room to other games to give any room for other games. You're just going back to that other live service, whatever that live service game is that you love. Maybe you're doing 2 live service games. Maybe you're playing Fortnite. Maybe you're playing Destiny. Maybe you're playing whatever it is, Warzone. There's so many different live service games. So if they made a game like they did back then with Destiny 1, no, it would just be like Suicide Squad. It would come out and it would fail miserably, because it would be like an Anthem. It'd be like a Marvel's Avengers, because they didn't learn from the past of the other games. Just like Twitch, just like YouTube, early content creators became big because they were the ones on the platform first. Destiny became big, one, because it was good, but it was one of the best and only live service games out there, so everyone loved it, and then it grew over the years and just kept snowballing, right? So that's the reason that I think if they made the exact same game they did back 10 years ago, it wouldn't be successful as it is today.
Right. I mean, so what you just suggested with the minimum viable product, I mean, that might not work, right? It would potentially go through what we just kind of hypothesized, which is the people wouldn't tolerate it. They'd be like, this isn't ready to go. I mean, they might get away with it just because it's Destiny, and it would still have enough of a draw and enough of a player pool to keep things going. But I don't know. I feel like it would probably really, really have an expeditious fail if they did that. They almost need to buy themselves time to build a true amazing full launch. They can't. I don't think they can do the half-baked launch.
Well, look at the First Descendant right now, right? The landscape of video games has completely changed. Genshin Impact, First Descendant, they're free-to-play games. Free-to-play games with as much content and as much stuff to earn or get loot and whatnot. Where Destiny was full price game, DLC on top of that, microtransactions on top of that. So now if you wait for Destiny 3, it's a completely different landscape. So does Destiny 3 come out? Is it a free-to-play game? Is it a charged full price $70 game? You know what I mean? Because by the time that comes out, who knows? We might have 2, 3, 4 other games like the First Descendant that is in that same type of business model where people are like, oh yeah, you don't have to pay for anything. You can get 200 hours in the game. I don't have to spend a dime, and it works for me. You know what I mean?
For sure. I think that's one of the big things that game companies are running into right now is they looked at the landscape of live service and the explosion of Fortnite, however long ago that you would say that was 6 years ago. And now that a lot of those games are making landfall, they're failing because it's like the entire landscape has shifted so fast. It was like the explosion of BR, but then now you only have a couple kings in BR. And then in live service, like you're saying, it's like, Destiny's been the king for a very long time, and other people have attempted to take a crack at it, right? Whether it's the Division 1 and 2 or Anthem. We'll see if the First Descendants has the longevity, to make it. But like you're saying, and this is something I've said quite a bit about Concord, is if you enter a landscape where everything's free to play, you're fighting it's almost like you're fighting a losing battle from moment one.
I was actually going to bring up Concord because I was like, look at Concord. It's a $40 game in a landscape of same type of games, free to play. And it's like, why would I pay $40 where I can play these same games? And even Marvel Rivals, right? It was a closed beta where you had to watch someone to get a code, and then all the codes were sold out and people were still trying to get into the thing. Meanwhile, open beta, and people were like, nah, I'm okay. I'll play it later, right? Like, no, you're not, because you have to pay $40 to play it later. So it's nothing. It's not a knock against Concord. Concord is trying to do $40 come into a realm where everything else that's popular right now is free to play. And how do you compete with that?
Well, and when I think of Destiny, it's like part of me says if they really want to start over, then start over. Start with a really, really good sort of handcrafted, bespoke, single player, also co-op experience with a great story, and do some DLCs. And if you garner the support and the financial success and the commercial success and the engagement, then you slowly turn it into a live service game. Like, the more I think about it, the more I look at Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 and how it slowly became what it is today. But I also look at No Man's Sky. And it's like No Man's Sky evolved into a live service ongoing game with these expeditions. And then, we don't exactly know what that's going to do and how that's going to tie into Light No Fire. But I wonder if that would be the ticket, if that would be the way forward, is to say, listen, don't bank on being live service. Create a game that you do have ongoing content models built for, but not a game that needs this massive player funnel. I've always said that the player funnel driven model is incredibly difficult because a player funnel model only works if you have a player funnel, and you don't have that until your game is a hit. I think a content driven model can lead to a player funnel model because you can have this sort of organic moment in this thing happen, like what happened with Helldivers 2, right? Explosion, tons of people playing, but then what happened? Well, the bottom fell out because it's not a game that's built for, number one, it's not a game built for that many people to play it in general, but it's also not built with a content model that's going to keep people that interested. Like war bonds aren't enough, right? So to me, I think that's the ticket here, is that if they want a future for Destiny, whatever they build next, I would not build it around player funnel. The player funnel has to happen organically, and your best recipe for that is to focus on content. And obviously, yes, you commit to ongoing content so people don't just abandon the game after it launches, like, oh, I'm done with the campaign and I'm done. Like an almost return to roots of a DLC model.
I agree.
And then if that works, Now you have justification, and you can look at the player base numbers, and you have 10 years of data or more from Destiny 2 to know how do we transition into an ongoing live service model. I think that's organically driven. That's driven by player impetus and player response, not this thing where companies are trying to manufacture and like, well, we're going to have a live service game from day one. Like the guys from Splitgate 2 are like, we want to have this game go for 10 years. I'm like, man, slow down. Why don't you work on getting one good year under your belt first, you know?
Right. Show proof of concept before you start, building a house, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't be like you're going to do it for 10 years and meanwhile you do it for 10 months type of thing.
I mean, do you think they could go traditional content model and it work? Just do DLCs, no seasons, no battle passes, like focus on the content and create a world that's fun to return to, but not a world you have to live in?
I think they can. I mean, I'm only one person. I love DLC. I love if a game comes out, you give me a product, I give you money, right? When I'm done with that product, if I love that product, I'll support your product again when you come out with the next thing. That's why I like Borderlands 2, where they come out with DLC and they had 4 DLCs and I bought them all, right? Like I love downloadable content, right? There's a DLC content. Battle passes, skins, to me personally, are not content. That's just doing the same thing you're doing now, but with a maid outfit on instead of a badass suit on, right? Like that's the difference. I like content. So I feel if they did come out, if Destiny 3 came out and they made the original game, if they want to have multiplayer and they have all the other stuff, cool. But make content, make that Dark Below, make that stuff where it also doesn't feel like they also cut it from the game. You see what I'm saying? Remember when Dark Below came out, everyone's like, oh, they cut it from the game. Everyone's like, no, they didn't. Then people got into that area and whatnot. They're like, oh yeah, they totally chopped up the game. Like, make a game, make a good game, make a game, sell a game. That's my motto. Okay. And once you make that game, you'll get the people. If you make a good game, people will play that game. They'll love that game. And if they love that game, they'll be like, yo, I can't wait for the next DLC. Look at Elden Tree, right? From Elden Ring, right? 2 years after they come out with that DLC, and everyone was like, oh my God, DLC. And they loved it because they love the main game. They made a game, they sold a game, and then they made an expansion for it, and people. So I do believe DLCs, downloadable content for that type of stuff, is still there. I think it's still viable. But companies are greedy, and just like what's that one content creator's name? He was is it Pirate Software? No, what's his name?
Thor.
Is that his name? No, is it
Pirate Software?
Thor? Is that?
Yeah, well, he goes by Thor, but Pirate Software, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. He said that, StarCraft, worked for this many years and it didn't do well, but they made one World of Warcraft skin and it blew StarCraft out of the water, right? And that's the greed from the corporation. So do they work 12 months to make DLC, or do they make one skin that can make as much money as that DLC would make in 1 week? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's always an interesting thing to think about, that like, and this is sort of the dilemma of something I was talking about with the chat previously, was, that players are like water. They're going to go and take the path of least resistance. And somebody cited you and said, 30's always talking about how you have to protect the player from themselves. They'll run in a 5-foot circle to get all the loot.
Yep.
Which, we've commonly pulled that in from the guy from Diablo that said that about Anthem. He's like, you have to, or else people will ruin their own experience. I think similarly, that's a real dilemma with microtransactions, is they're cheap and they're easy, right? So it's like everybody's buying this skin for $2, $3, whatever, and it ends up generating more money than your
entire game, yeah.
Yeah, your super, substantive, handcrafted DLC that you've worked all this time on. And Johnny from the art department made a really cool gun skin that flickers and flips around, and everybody buys that. And you're like, what the heck am I doing here? I think they're dance partners, though. Like, I remember telling people I wasn't concerned about the microtransactions in Anthem, because I was like, the microtransactions in Anthem won't matter if they don't have a player pool, and they're only going to have a player pool if the content is good. So you're not going to get people to buy those micros and drop that money if you can't amass a player pool. The one requires the other. And this is why I think saying we're going to be a live service game from day one and we want our game to go for 10 years, I think that is an absolute fool's errand at this point. It's like, you can't do that. I think one has to come before the other. I do think ongoing content plan is fine, But this idea that like we have to have this massively popular game from moment one, you know what it leads to? It just leads to trend chasing. Like you're just going to do what everybody else is doing, which is what the whole industry feels like it's doing like right now. Kill the Justice League feels like all they did was inorganically and inauthentically trend chase what a bunch of other games were doing. And this is what Destiny can do, I think. They can own the fact that we're the OG. We are the live service looter shooter. We were the first. And if they have this massive comeback and in a couple of years, they drop a game or whatever, I think it could be as popular, if not more as popular as Destiny was at its height. Because I just think there's just something special about it. It's why it was frustrating to watch Halo squandered as a franchise, because I always said there's something about Halo, right? When Joseph Staten came back and tried to get it out the door, I thought there's just something about Halo. Man, I got to tell you, there is something about Destiny. I think there always will be, and for them to recapture that, I think would be great.
Well, here's a question for you, because it popped up, and it was a couple weeks ago when the story came out. But the AI that potentially made the skin for Call of Duty, right, where it was all created by just AI, no human actually touched the actual thing. Now, is that a problem, right? Where now all of a sudden there's no devs making the actual content for the content that people are buying for the microtransactions, but people are still having fun. As a consumer side, you're like, you don't care if Todd, Karen, Tim are making the thing, or if AI bot is making the thing. You're just excited because it's a cool skin and you buy it. Does that become a problem now, or do people just kind of shrug it off, right? They're just like, I don't care who makes it. It's a cool skin. I'm going to purchase it. It's not even made. You're not even supporting the devs anymore, right? Because you're just supporting AI that's creating these really cool skins.
I look at AI and the machine learning or generative AI technology. I look at it the same way I look at procedural generation, and used in a lazy or sort of boring, inauthentic, non-creative way, I think people will fundamentally reject that. I think if you lean too heavily on it, it will end up backfiring, because I think human perception is in our favor here. Now, obviously, AI can become more advanced and make that harder to detect and harder to deduce. But I do think when you play a game with a handcrafted area with great environmental storytelling. I just experienced a section of this in The Last of Us Part 2. They let you go down into the bottom of a hospital that was like basically ground zero for the outbreak, like when it first started to happen. And the way the rooms are set up and the dead bodies and the notes and the stuff scrawled on the walls is actually just remarkable. Procedural generation in AI will probably never get us there. It just can't. I don't think so, because when a human touches it, a human tends to be able to sense that, a human touched it. So when I look at AI and I look at procedural generation, I think these are tools to be wielded. And the thoughtful, creative artist that wields AI for a skin or a cosmetic, and the thoughtful, creative development team that wields procedural generation in a good way, I think they'll stand apart, and I think they will then drown out or outshine the thoughtless, inauthentic stuff. So I'm putting some confidence in consumer and player perception, hoping that we don't start getting a bunch of generic AI created, procedurally generated games where nothing feels authentic or handcrafted anymore. I don't think that will happen, because I think the demand and the enjoyment factor just won't be there. You'll be able to tell that it's chintzy and cheap.
Yeah, as who said it? Master Chief said, if the game's fun, I don't care, right? And I think that's the main thing, right? Like,
true.
If you don't know, if it's like the Pepsi challenge back in the day, right? They put it behind a thing, you drink it, you don't know if it's Coke or Pepsi, you know what I mean? Like they know what it is. If people play the game and they don't know it's AI generated or skin was created by AI, and they're just playing it and going, I'm having fun, I don't think they care. I don't think they care. They don't care if Todd took 12 years to make that game, or if AI bot took 12 months to make that game. I think if it's a fun game, I think people forgive it and just move on.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, too, I think plays a big role. We've always said something about Destiny that keeps players coming back is it's just so satisfying. Like, I'm watching this guy play over there on MK Ice and Fire, and I'm watching him wield abilities, guns, and weapons, and it all has a familiar feel, right? He's hurling projectiles across a room. He's using a gun that I'm confident I've used before, and there's something familiar about it, but there's also something incredibly satisfying about it. It's a loop that just feels good to play. And I've always said that's an assumed and presumed reality. Your game and your gameplay loop has to feel excellent. And if you can nail that, after that, you have to nail the harder and more difficult things, which is, I've said that a lot of games recently have failed to not answer the psychological questions. They answer the technical questions. Well, why should I come back and play your game? Oh, well, we're going to have more content in a battle pass. Well, that's a technical answer. That's not a psychological answer. And I feel like something that Destiny mastered was unspoken psychological answers that, like, it just felt good to come back. That it just felt like this wonderful world to be in, and all I needed was more power, more guns, more baddies to shoot, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna play. Destiny never said, oh, the reason to come back and play is we got battle passes, we got DLCs, and we got content.
Right.
That kind of came later, right? And so I think, I do think companies need to focus on what's that intrinsic unspoken thing that just makes your game super enjoyable to play and come back to. Because if you strip a game down just to the purely mechanical parts, you're just going to end up with something that I do think is inauthentic and boring, and people will just put down. They'll just say, well, why would I come back? It's just, it's just a battle pass. Like, I actually defended Kill the Justice League quite a bit when I said the content loop and the gameplay feels good. But then when I got to the end game, I was like, no, they made the same mistake Anthem made. It's like, it feels good to play your game, but there's nothing on the other side of it.
Yep. This is shallow, very shallow.
Well, a lot of people in chat have been chiming in, and I do want to pull some of your guys' comments in. So I think something that would be fun to do with Mike and with the chat right now is I want to know what you think the best era of Destiny was. What was it that you really look back on and you think is the best era? So chat, feel free to weigh in. Chat, while you're doing that, take a quick second and smash that like button. Let's get to 200 likes. And you are close to making Madam Shoutcast tonight if you guys keep running the numbers up. But really what I want to know is right now, that's what I'm most interested in, is what do you think the best era of Destiny? There's people that go to Destiny 1, Destiny 2, they go to a particular season, maybe they go to a particular year where they feel like the cadence of content was the best. If you're asked that question, you got to think right off the top of your head, right? Where's your mind go?
Mine is was it called the Forgotten City? That whole era of when they added it and the way you progressed through the game, then the city opened up. You know what I mean? Like, and then it was just more game inside there. It felt like it was like an onion. You were just peeling open and you're finding more layers of that game. That was my pinnacle of Destiny.
We have a lot of people saying Forsaken, which doesn't surprise me. That was sort of the turning point of. That's
Destiny. The Forgotten City, right? The Forgotten City is in Forsaken, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been so long since I played, it's hard to remember the timeline. And I don't remember the names of some things.
I forget. Pardon me, because it's been years, but I think it was Forsaken, which was the Forgotten City that was there. Actually, it wasn't even called the Forgotten City. It was Dreams. What the hell was it called?
The Dreaming City.
Dreaming City, thank you. See, I'm merging them like I did for Mexican Martini. Right.
Well, when you said Forgotten City, I was thinking, oh, that must have been content that I didn't get to play.
No. That's what I'm talking about. The Dreaming City in Forsaken. See, I combined them like I did the Mexican Martini thing earlier. Right.
Oh.
It's that to me was the best Destiny that there was.
Yeah, people in chat might have been saying Forsaken then because they were trying to tell you. That's what Mike was saying. Yeah. I would have a hard time picking just one. I think I would probably agree that Forsaken was probably one of the best times in Destiny 2 specifically. I also think Season of Opulence was one of the best seasons where we went and did the menagerie. I feel like Vicarious Visions is, to this day, I think they had a very good and firm understanding of what Destiny players want. I felt like they were Destiny players creating Destiny content. So I felt like Season of Opulence with the menagerie and all that, I thought was very, very well done. Probably one of the best seasons that I had played. But I do think I would agree with Forsaken. Now, if I go all the way back to D1, I can't say anything other than Age of Triumph and Rise of Iron. Like that whole era of time, because Rise of Iron had Wrath of the Machine, which I maintain is still, like, that was always... I can't say it's the best raid because I haven't played all of the raids now, but Wrath of the Machine...
back then.
Yeah.
You're saying, yeah.
100%. And but then you know, Age of Triumph, where we got to play a repurposed raid every week, like that armor for King's Fall with the cracks in it and like the glowing blue. That to me was the era of Destiny that had everything. It had meaningful purpose of grind, great aspirational content, and it was just absolutely fully injected with nostalgia. Like, they were always so good about that. I remember that time we went back to that spot and our ghost looked out on that place where we first came back, to life. So to me, that's where I go. And I don't know if they can recapture that. I think it might be a mistake to try to recapture that. But I do feel like everybody always said, you know, Destiny's brightest days are ahead. That's probably now provably not true. But I do think there's probably a time in the future where Destiny could have what we would say is a good and a bright future, but maybe not as bright as it once was.
I think you picked Wrath of the Machine because you were patient zero during that time frame. I think that subconsciously it's in the back of your head why you like it, because at that moment you career-wise and also like you were at the top, you know what I mean? Like, and that moment when running those raids and stuff like that, I think that hits a little different for you.
Well, I think that was a sweet time because I was in the grind and I was growing, and it like peak for me obviously was, you know, the beginning of 2020 when they were doing all those events in the tower, and I can't even think about the amount of people we used to have hanging out for, you know, shoutcasting the fashion show, and we needed everybody to come in for the corridors of time, you know, and staying up until 4 a.m. and inputting things in spreadsheets and grinding.
That's it though. What you're describing though, that's what Destiny is. It wasn't just about the shooting and the looties, right? It was like the community and how everyone was doing stuff, and it just felt so good. It was like you woke up, you turned on Twitch, you watched people do certain things, you watch people's runs, there was so I don't think you can capture that ever again. Even if they try to do Destiny 3, I don't think they could capture it again like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were obviously things that took place that really hurt the streaming world. I think a lot of that was self-inflicted by Bungie and how things were handled, and we don't need to we don't need to read.
I don't want to go back that way. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's worth mentioning. I do think that was an intangible part of the game's success. I do. I think the streaming ethos and the Twitch directory was 100% intangibly linked to the game and the game's success and the community's feel about the game. And I do think they self-imposed a giant wound in 2020. And I just don't know if that vibe ever returned. And I think that did. I think that played a role in where things ended up. I think they are related. I said this a couple of times today, that I feel like their hubris came home to roost. That they felt like they were untouchable. It was like they could do and say and act in any way that they wanted. And I just feel like over the years, they made it really easy to stop playing, right? With the way they used their blog post, and they got very vocal on very divisive issues. And they made it really easy for people to be like, you know what? I'm not down with y'all. I'm not down with y'all. And I think they have to consider that. And I think Sony has to consider that going forward as well. As, are you about games or are you about, you know, all these other things?
Real quick, Dark Taco, I don't think they could capture it. And you know why? Bungie wasn't trying to capture what happened. It organically happened. Right? If you try to make it and force it to happen, it's never going to happen. Right? And I just don't think they'll ever capture that thing. I think that moment, even I'm a huge Battlefield guy. Battlefield Bad Company 2 to me was like the peak. And I've talked about this in my streams before. Like what they did with that game during that era, during that time, is like it can't get captured again. Battlefield 3 was good. Battlefield 4 was good, but it just didn't capture what the community did and the way the game was and just that whole era. And Battlefield's been trying to capture that moment again. Even when they did 2042, they tried to have that Battlefield moments again. They forced it. They tried to force those moments again to happen instead of just organically happening.
Yeah. And I think that's something we saw happen even in the streaming world, like when Mixer, you know, tried to buy a bunch of big streamers and then that didn't work. Like, I think there's things, that's why I kind of advocated for start with the content model, and then if the player funnel model and seasonal, if that becomes, if there's an impetus for that, then do that. But I think if you try to do that, you just try to sort of inorganically create hyper excitement or, have these things. It's like there was no way to explain how those things happened back then. Like the charity events and the amount of money people gave. It was like there was this sort of, again, there was this intangible quality and this vibe that has gone. And I think it's okay to grieve that, but I also think it's okay to acknowledge a lot of that was self-inflicted. I do think Bungie needs to reconsider, and I think Sony needs to reconsider how those things are handled in the future. Because I don't think I've quite ever seen another game handle things the way that were handled. Like the way they interacted with content creators and the way they handled 2020. I don't know if I've ever seen another game company do that. And you have to ask, you have to wonder. It's like, okay, well, did that play a role? Did that, was that a factor here? And I think it was. And I also think like when their social team, their community team was basically like, we're not going to interact with the community anymore because the community's too toxic, and they all like took a break. And then now they're going to interact with the community from like a centralized Twitter account. That just feels like a more, like, again, they're leaning into a more professional way of interacting with the public and the community, because I just think it was fraught with problems. And I think going forward, they're going to have to think about that does, I think, play a role in your game's success.
Real quick, I want to go over real quick what Pete Parson put out, and people saying that, he spoke positively of like his mess ups and whatnot for, not positively, but he owned it on the, took it on the chin for what he wrote and said that, bad management, money issues, red in the red and whatnot. And I had a theory last night. I want to run it past you, right? Because Jeff Grubb put out last night after a podcast, I read it right at the end. He put out that Herman Holtz is coming in, right? And he's basically taking over Bungie. And I think that because Hiroki Totoki, best name in the business, said earlier in the year that Bungie has issues and we have to figure it out. And Herman Holtz, fundamentally, again, this is my theory, not that I think this is right. This is my theory. I want to make that clear. This is my theory, that he busted the door down and told Pete Parsons, "You're done here. You're going to write this up, okay? And you're going to take it on the chin. You're going to get your golden parachute. You're going to go bye-bye, right?" He's just taking all the blame, taking all the right. Sony looks like the good guys, and I'm not saying Sony's the bad guys here, but Sony looks like in a better light because not only did Bungie let go of 220 people. Obviously, it's Sony because Sony owns Bungie. But they're taking 155 of those people and merging them into Sony because Sony looks like, hey, we're taking the talent, we're taking the thing, we're making our own thing, we're bringing them in. So it makes them look good. And this is why I think Herman Holtz came in, told Pete Parsons that you guys, your fun's done here. You guys mistreated the funds. You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to do this. You're going to go bye-bye. Luke Smith, Noseworthy, you guys are gone too, but they didn't fire him. They said, I think the jig is up. We're leaving because we can't do what we want anymore because now dad's home. You know what I mean? Because dad's home. The kids can't play anymore. And there was a lot of mistreated funds. And I believe that's what's happening. And this is why the upper executives are leaving. And I said this last night on my podcast. It's like a cancer, right? You have to get rid of all the cancer when you buy a company. You can't have a little bit left because then you'll have to go back for chemo and you'll still be sick, right? You have to clean house. You have to take out the bad and then reestablish it with better blood cells, right? Better to heal your body, and that's what Bungie's doing right now. That's what Sony's doing with Bungie. They got to get rid of the rot that's inside the company, put their guys in place, and then rebuild that company back up to make it what they want it to be.
Well, and then I think there's some merit to your theory because I remember the last time people were laid off, there was internal angst about the fact that the leadership was going to leave in 2026 once all the money from Sony was done being paid to them, like since they amortized the purchase of the company. They were basically going to try to get Marathon out the door to make money on it, and then they were going to leave in 2026, basically leaving, the company in sort of a bad state. I wonder if there's merit to that, and if Sony was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to let that happen. So there could be a lot here. We could be very close to the reality of like they pump the brakes on everything for the future of Destiny. They're pumping the brakes on the leadership and saying, no, you guys aren't going to sit here and do that. You're not going to get to ride off into the sunset in 2026 and leave the company in shambles. We're going to do a leadership reset and get this company on a good path. And I think that'll help morale at the company.
Yeah.
Morale at the company's got to be terrible when the leadership has been driving the boat into the sand. And then the people that have to get out are the ones that are not the ones that made the bad decisions. They're just the employees. They're just the low man on the totem pole.
Well, I find it funny. I forget the person's Twitter account name, but she worked for the company, and she said that he's a thief, he's a liar, and said a bunch of other stuff, and said I can't say it publicly. And what that says to me is that they signed some heavy NDAs that they can't say anything other than what they said. But I would love to be a fly on the wall to know what else is going to be said, because to say that you're a thief and a liar out front in the public and then say I can't say more publicly, like she's holding her tongue, you know what I mean? Like she's holding back big time. And I would love to know more about that.
What I find amusing about that is that's the same person that back in 2021, when the toxic culture was exposed, she was on the front lines defending the company and basically running a PR shielding campaign for them. She was trying to act like it was about women and persons of color. And I was trying to say the toxic culture is still in place. The retaliation culture is still in place. You can tell by reading the IGN article. And I did. I had a former employee reach out and say they liked my coverage because of that. So it's interesting that like she's saying all that now, but back when
Didn't say anything when it was happening.
That's right. Back when the toxic culture was exposed, you're out here running PR for the company. So it's like, I guarantee you there were some pretty heavy NDAs signed because,
oh sure,
you defended the company and were well in play drinking the Kool-Aid when they were writing your paycheck.
Exactly.
But now it's you're bad, you're a thief, you're a liar. It's like, oh, okay. I don't give a whole lot of applause to that, but I'm curious if there's going to be anybody that basically refuses to sign those non-disparaging agreements so that they can go to the public, or at least go to Jason Schreier, because Schreier is supposed to publish an article today, and he usually gets a lot of good details.
If they're getting packages, severance packages and stuff like that, I guarantee you to get that package, you got to sign a nice little hefty NDA where you can't say squat about nothing. And I don't know how long that is, but because I've worked with companies, I've done government work and stuff like that. That's about all I can say. Where I can't say anything about anything that I've seen or done because I'm under strict until the life of me, right? You know what I mean? Unless it's said publicly otherwise, can't say anything. So I wonder what kind of NDAs they're signing for people to say that they can't say anything, to say something like that, because she wants to say something, but she can't, right? She's like, I can't say it publicly. I can say it private, right? In her house or at a bar with somebody, but she can't say it publicly out to people. So it's interesting.
Well, if enough of them go to the press anonymously, it's hard to trace it back to them. Like that's one of the things.
Yeah, it'll come out. It definitely will come out. Yeah. One guy said he's done of it. He said you lied to my face. He's like, I can't take it anymore. And 2 days later, he got fired and whatnot. So there's someone going to break, but lawsuits will follow that if they do break their NDAs.
Oh, for sure. Because I was surprised that former CM, now back at the company, DMG, he was like, this is inexcusable. There needs to be accountability. I'm like, are you trying to get walked out the front door again?
Right.
Like, are they going to
let that's feeding you right now?
Well, that's what makes me think that they know that leadership's gone. They know that Parsons is likely gone, because to be that bold, to be out in the public and basically saying this is inexcusable, there needs to be accountability, it's like you're basically asking to get fired at that point. You're as you said, you're biting the hand that feeds. Like in the midst of a firefight, you're kind of doing the unspeakable of what we would call friendly fire. But it'll be interesting to see if he's still there in a couple of weeks, because
so I didn't know he left and came back to the company. See, I don't really follow this stuff. So how long was he gone for?
I don't know. It's been a couple years. Yeah, I don't even know if he left of his own accord, because he was one of the ones that said there's not a muzzle big enough to make us stop talking about these social issues. And then all of a sudden, Bungie's no longer talking about social issues, and the CM team got laid off, and he was one of the first to go. I think he was walked out personally.
Is that after Sony bought them? Is when
Yes.
this happened?
Yep. We always said, Creature and I always thought, now that Sony purchased them, the shenanigans is going to stop. Right? Like, you can't be out here, virtue signaling and targeting people and getting in fights. Like, yeah, I was told privately there was even a Discord server where they would blacklist content creators. They had a list of what were called the good guys. And the one guy basically befriended somebody on Twitter who was one of the blacklisted people, and he got kicked out of the Discord. Like, I was told this privately by somebody I trust. It's like, this guy has no reason to like make up this story. He wasn't trying to like clout chase, because I was radioactive when he told me this. I was ruined. It's like, so when he told me this, it was like, yeah, there's been a lot of crap that's gone on. So it's surprising that anybody would take that risk and speak against the company right now.
If I worked for some companies in the film industry that I worked for, that it was a ride or die mentality, where if something went wrong, but you wanted your job, you would have to stay quiet, right, and not say anything, because you wouldn't be blacklisted. But if you knew something and you wanted to say something and you did say something, then you would get blacklisted and you wouldn't have that job anymore. So a lot of people were just riding around because they were paying their checks, they were getting paid, getting good money, and they wouldn't say anything. But I'm not that person, right? I have integrity. So that's why I didn't work for that company, because I actually spoke up. I got blacklisted for quite a bit, and had to work my way back up the ladder in the same social circles as the person that tried to blacklist it. Or they did blacklist me for a bit, but tried to blacklist me for longer. And it's like, how are you working here? Because she saw me on a different job. I was like, how did you get the job? I was like, well, because I'm a hard worker, right? That's the way it works. So yeah, there's a lot of people that don't want to talk because they will get blacklisted, and that hurts you personally, because you're trying to provide for your family or provide for yourself and whatnot. So you have to ride or die. You have to either stay quiet, get the check, or you die on that hill and get blacklisted and then don't say anything, or don't get anything.
Right. I mean, even to this day, I had a company working with me, and then all of a sudden they dropped me from their little program, and they said they received an email from somebody, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I was like, 4 years later that people can still do that? Like, that's called business disruption.
Oh, this was recently, huh?
Yeah, this was recent. Recent. That's like, that's called business disruption. You can't just be like, we got an email, we don't want to work with you anymore. It's like, are you kidding me? It's like, but that's the way the industry works. It's like, that's why so many people. I remember Mylan Games. Like, he didn't want to say anything about his bad experience with Bungie, because it's like, well, I'm gonna get blacklisted. I'm gonna get in trouble, and then I won't be included, or and then that's the scary thing, is it directly affects the money that you make. Like, that's the unhealthy relationship with some of these studios and press outlets and content creators. It's like, they won't cross them. They won't report on the truth or the facts, because it'll hurt their money. I think it's a really, really unhealthy relationship.
Sure, it's people abusing the power that they have. Also, you like what I do? I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, you see it in politics, you see it in other places. Yeah, you play ball, we'll agree. We'll give you the jobs. You don't play ball, sorry, you can't work in this business. And that's how it happens.
Yeah, Necro, Mylan did speak about it, and I remember him saying that was a fear that he had, was basically like, I could be basically burning a bridge right now by essentially saying how poorly I was treated and it wasn't properly handled. And it's like, a lot of people kept their mouths shut because they didn't want that to happen.
That company shouldn't have said they got an email. They kind of showed their hand a little bit to you there. They could have just said, like, we don't want to work with you anymore because of financial reasons or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they could have said something else, but they said they got an email, meaning that it got persuaded them to do what they did, which is bad.
Yeah. It was interesting, to say the least. So, oh man. Well, I mean, I think we'll follow this story. I have had enough distance with Destiny and with Bungie now that we don't feel like this is out of bounds for me to cover it or to talk about it. Obviously, I don't play the game. If anything were to ever get rectified or fixed or walked back or whatever, maybe with new leadership we could rebuild some of those bridges. We'll see. I'm not putting any eggs in that basket, but I think we'll follow this story because Mike and I have covered Destiny for so long. Even from a distance, I think this is worth covering and talking about, because there's a lot that could change and could happen in the next couple of years. And I got to tell you, I'm on your side with this one. Destiny's just too big to let go of. The question is, where does it end up?
I always said that the only thing because every time a game came out, everyone's like, oh, this is a Destiny kill. I go, no. The only thing that can kill Destiny is Bungie itself, right? And they didn't even kill it because it's done. 10 years. They made it to the 10-year mark. They got all the stuff they wanted to do, at least that we know of. So, and again, I don't think it's dead. I don't think Destiny's dead. I think they'll just put it on the shelf for a bit, wait to see what happens, let the dust settle, and then come out swinging with the next rendition of it. Yeah.
Well, guys and gals, every Friday we go to the Green Room, which is designed for Member Plus and above. A great reason for you to upgrade is there's extra content for you, but if you're on a gifted membership or a standard membership, there is a stream tonight for everybody. You guys hit the goal of 500 members, so it is community game night. You fell a little short of the stretch goal. We were going to make Madam Shoutcast your gameplay. I mean, stranger things have happened. If we get 53 members in the next 2 minutes, then you can make her shoutcast. But we're gonna shift gears here. But before we do that, I do want to give Mike an opportunity. Where can they find you? What kind of content you're working on? And and he's clickable in the description, guys. Show Mike some love. Check out his channel while he's telling you what's over there.
So you can follow me on 30NSG. I just do a morning show, 10 o'clock in the morning till about 1 o'clock Eastern time, Monday through Thursday. We just go over the gaming news. We go over a couple different topics. Chat is 1,000% of the show. Bounce back and forth between chat. We do live streams in the evening with gameplay Monday night, Tuesday night. Wednesday night, I have a podcast sometimes when I get a guest. Otherwise, I do a segment called STS, which is shooting the blank with my brother, because we chat while we're shooting stuff. And then we do a podcast Thursday night called Generation X Gaming, a weekly podcast that goes over a few of the top stories from the past week, and we rant along the way. We're doing that for 10 years. Episode 404 we did last night. So come on out. It's a good time.
Yeah, you guys should definitely check that out. I was on that show a lifetime ago for the very first time. It was over 9 years ago. And Mike and I have done shows ever since. So we obviously appreciate not just his contribution to the channel, but I appreciate his friendship. My journey is obviously, it's interwoven with Destiny. It's impossible for me to not, be honest about that. And after everything that happened, basically I want to say the only person who publicly stood by me. I want to be careful. I don't know if anybody else did, but I'm pretty sure basically everybody else completely and utterly abandoned me. Now, some people have come to me privately, but I think they're still scared to show that solidarity publicly because it's so toxic out there.
I think I was the linchpin of bringing out like the liars of a certain people, because I was there and they lied about it, and I was like, that's not what happened.
Yes, you were the catalyst. I never want to throw out your name when I say this, so I always
I'm okay with it.
I'm always like, I have an eyewitness. Mike was the one that basically got its entire timeline scrubbed, because once they realized they had spoken dishonestly about me, the guys from Rare Drop is who we're talking about. They had made statements about me and what I had done at conferences, and Mike was basically like, that's not true, I was there. And once we had definitive proof, both from the realm of his eyewitness, as well as we had actual documentation and emails and stuff, all of a sudden timelines got scrubbed. So Mike,
they don't like me. They don't like me.
Yeah, well, dishonest people tend to not like those who tell the truth. That's a reality. So yeah, I always make mention of that, and I never mention 30 because I never want to throw that heat on him, but 30 was the catalyst to that. So a stand-up guy to stand in front of all that nonsense and be like, no, I was there, that's not true, while everybody else stayed quiet. There are plenty of people that know plenty of things that refuse to say something. And listen, I get it. It's scary and it's not fun. And I know there are people at Bungie that feel the same way. They feel like, man, they want to talk about Pete Parsons or they want to talk about the leadership. I 100% get the fear and the hesitancy, but man, there's just so much liberation in living in the light and telling the truth and not hiding for fear of pain. Because you take a lot of these abusive people, you take their power away, and I appreciate how Mike has helped with that over the years, just with his friendship and his integrity and willingness to speak up. So
I appreciate it.
Well, on that note, we are going to go to the green room. We appreciate you guys so much, especially, those of you who come here every week and support this, man. If you like this content, the absolute best way to support it is to hit like, hit subscribe. Those are free. It doesn't cost anything to do that, and it helps out the videos. It helps out the channel. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to spam a link in chat, and we're going to get out of here. And don't forget, all members, don't forget to tune in tonight for Friday night with my wife, and we'll be doing community game night tonight as well with Fall Guys. So get Fall Guys installed and updated. There's some fun games in there that they've added. Yeah, dude. Man. It's still around. It's still fun.
Well, I know. My son plays it.
So let's start the green room here. Thanks so much for being a member plus or above. If you are at the member plus tier of membership or VIP, this is an extra segment. Now, you might start seeing this segment show up on More Than Friday. We've been using it periodically. If I don't have to make a video like yesterday, I hung out with y'all and I played some Last of Us. And we're going to hang out with Mike and Creature here in a moment and just kind of shoot the bull, as it were, and have a good time. It does get a little not safe for work, so this is not like a public stream, so there could be some swearing and things like that. So I'm going to end the previous stream and the previous talk show with Mike about the future of Destiny, and then I'm going to make sure that thumbnail gets changed so it doesn't show us live anymore. So